Imagine waking up tomorrow with a radical new ability, the power to be completely unbothered by what others think of you, not in an arrogant way, not in a disconnected way, but in a way that feels like finally taking a full breath after years of breathing shallowly. What would change? How would you move through the world differently? What decisions would you make? What words would finally leave your mouth? We spend our lives in an exhausting dance, contorting ourselves to fit expectations, swallowing words that feel too dangerous to speak, abandoning dreams that might invite ridicule. We've become masters of self-censorship, experts at predicting what might disappoint others. And in this constant performance, something profound gets lost: ourselves. The French philosopher Michel de Montaigne recognized this universal struggle nearly 5 centuries ago, writing, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself." But belonging to oneself is precisely what our world makes difficult. From the moment we're conscious, we're taught to seek approval, to fear rejection, to measure our worth through others' eyes. Social media has only amplified this ancient human tendency, turning validation into a measurable currency. Likes, comments, shares, a dopamine slot machine we can't stop pulling. Yet the more desperately we seek this validation, the more it controls us, and the further we drift from what Montaigne called the art of living well. Today, we're going to explore a counterintuitive truth, that caring less about the right things can be the path to living more. That detachment, rather than being cold or aloof, can be the foundation of genuine connection, authentic expression, and profound inner peace. This isn't about becoming indifferent to everything. It's about being selective with your emotional investments. It's about distinguishing between what truly matters and what merely masquerades as important. Let me be clear about what I don't mean. I'm not advocating nihilism, the belief that nothing matters. I'm not suggesting you abandon responsibilities or relationships. I'm not promoting selfishness disguised as enlightenment. What I am suggesting is revolutionary in its simplicity, that most of what keeps you up at night, most of what drains your energy, most of what holds you back, doesn't actually deserve your care. And that realization is freedom. Michel de Montaigne was born in 1533 to a wealthy French family. He lived during a time of intense religious conflict and social upheaval. After serving as a magistrate and witnessing the cruelty humans inflict on one another in the name of certainty, he retreated to his library tower. There, surrounded by classical texts and his own thoughts, he pioneered a new form of writing, the essay, which allowed him to explore human nature with unprecedented honesty and self-reflection. What made Montaigne revolutionary wasn't just his writing style, but his radical approach to living. In an age obsessed with religious dogma and social hierarchy, he dared to question everything, including himself. "What do I know?" became his motto. This wasn't an expression of ignorance, but of profound wisdom, an acknowledgement that certainty is often an illusion, that human knowledge has limits, and that true freedom begins with accepting our own uncertainty. Montaigne wrote, "We trouble our life by thoughts about death, and our death by thoughts about life." In this simple observation lies a profound truth. Our suffering often comes not from reality itself, but from our resistance to it. We agonize over aging instead of embracing each stage of life. We fear failure so much that we never try. We worry so much about being judged that we never express our true selves. We're so concerned with controlling outcomes that we miss the beauty of what's actually happening. Think about your own life for a moment. How much of your mental energy is consumed by worrying about things beyond your control? How often do you rehearse conversations before they happen, replay interactions after they've ended, or imagine worst-case scenarios that never materialize? How frequently do you edit your words, your appearance, your opinions, not to align with your values, but to avoid disapproval? And most importantly, what has this vigilance cost you? The cost is immense. When we're constantly monitoring ourselves through others' eyes, we lose access to our own authentic voice. When we're perpetually braced for judgment, our bodies remain in a state of low-grade stress. When we make decisions based on avoiding disapproval rather than pursuing meaning, we end up living someone else's life. As the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer noted, we forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people. But there is another way. Montaigne showed us that we can choose to care deeply about a few things that truly matter while releasing our attachment to the rest. He wrote, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to be self-sufficient." This self-sufficiency isn't about isolation, but about finding your center of gravity within yourself rather than in others' opinions. It's about developing what the Stoics called an inner citadel, a core of calm that remains unshaken by external events. This inner stability doesn't happen overnight. It's cultivated through practice, through repeatedly asking yourself, does this truly matter to me? Or am I caring about this because I think I should? Is this worry serving me? Or is it merely a habit? Is this fear protecting me from genuine danger? Or is it keeping me from growth? Each time you question your automatic reactions, you create space between stimulus and response. And in that space lies your freedom. Consider how much of what you worry about today will matter in 5 years. Think about how many sleepless nights you've spent over situations that resolved themselves or problems that never materialized. Reflect on how many opportunities you've missed because you were too concerned with how you might be perceived. As Mark Twain supposedly said, "I've had a lot of worries in my life, most of which never happened." The paradox of caring less is that it often leads to greater success. When you're not paralyzed by the fear of failure, you take more risks. When you're not exhausted by managing others' perceptions, you have more energy for creative work. When you're not distracted by every criticism or setback, you maintain momentum toward your goals. Look at any truly innovative person. They've mastered the art of being selectively deaf to opinions that would derail most people. Elon Musk was ridiculed for believing private companies could launch rockets. J.K. Rowling was rejected by 12 publishers before someone took a chance on Harry Potter. Vincent van Gogh sold only one painting during his lifetime. What separates these people from countless others with similar talents is not just persistence. It's their ability to maintain conviction in the face of doubt, criticism, and failure. They cared deeply about their vision and less about the noise surrounding it. Montaigne understood that our preoccupation with others' opinions isn't just psychologically draining, it's fundamentally irrational. He wrote, "How many things served us yesterday as articles of faith, which today we deem but fables? Public opinion is fickle, contradictory, and often wrong. The same society that once celebrated might now celebrate compassion. The same critics who dismiss your work today might praise it tomorrow. The same person who judges your choices might secretly envy your courage. This doesn't mean we should ignore all feedback or live without consideration for others. It means we should be discerning about whose opinions we value. As Aristotle suggested, we should listen to the wise and the virtuous, those who have earned our respect through their character and insight, while recognizing that even they can be wrong. The goal isn't to silence all external voices, but to ensure they don't drown out your own inner wisdom." There's a story about the Buddha encountering a man who insulted him at length. When the man finished, the Buddha asked, "If someone offers you a gift and you decline it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man replied, "To the giver." The Buddha smiled and said, "Precisely, and I decline your insults." This isn't just a clever retort, it's a profound illustration of emotional sovereignty. We can choose which opinions to accept and which to let pass by without disturbing our peace. This sovereignty extends beyond others' opinions to our relationship with uncertainty itself. Montaigne embraced the unpredictability of life rather than fighting against it. He wrote, "My life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. How much of our anxiety comes from trying to control what cannot be controlled? How much suffering do we create by resisting what is? When we release our grip on certainty, we don't become passive, we become responsive, able to dance with life rather than wrestle with it. Think of it like swimming in the ocean. Fighting against a current exhausts you quickly. Swimming parallel to shore before attempting to return is more effective. Similarly, acceptance isn't surrender, it's strategic realignment. It's acknowledging reality as it is before attempting to change what can be changed. As the Serenity Prayer suggests, wisdom lies in knowing the difference between what we can control and what we cannot. One of the most powerful areas to practice this discernment is in our relationship with failure. Our culture has pathologized failure, treating it as something to be avoided at all costs, rather than an inevitable part of any meaningful endeavor. But as Montaigne observed, there is no man so good that if he placed all his actions and thoughts under the scrutiny of the laws, he would not deserve hanging 10 times in his life. Perfection is not only impossible, it's boring. When we stop caring so much about being perfect, we create space for being authentic. When we stop treating failure as catastrophic, we become willing to experiment. When we stop equating mistakes with our worth, we can learn from them rather than being defined by them. Some of humanity's greatest discoveries have come through accidents, failures, and wrong turns. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin because his laboratory was messy. Columbus found America while looking for India. Post-it notes were the result of an adhesive that wasn't sticky enough. This doesn't mean we should be careless or irresponsible. It means we should distinguish between conscientious effort and anxious perfectionism. The former is about doing your best while accepting human limitations. The latter is about trying to control how others perceive you. One leads to growth, the other leads to paralysis. As Salvador Dali said, "Have no fear of perfection, you'll never reach it." Perhaps nowhere is our fear of judgment more evident than in our relationship with our bodies. We live in a culture that has turned self-improvement into a full-time job, that has convinced us our bodies are projects to be constantly refined rather than vessels to be inhabited and enjoyed. Montaigne, by contrast, wrote extensively and unapologetically about bodily functions, illness, and aging, subjects considered taboo both then and now. He understood that our obsession with physical perfection is not just exhausting, but fundamentally at odds with being human. Kings and philosophers defecate, he famously wrote, reminding us that no amount of status or intellect exempts us from our animal nature. When we stop caring so much about presenting a flawless exterior, we can direct that energy toward genuine health, pleasure, and presence in our bodies as they actually are, not as we wish them to be. The same principle applies to aging. Our culture treats getting older as something to be fought rather than embraced, selling us endless products and procedures to maintain the illusion of youth. But Montaigne saw each stage of life as having its own wisdom and beauty. He wrote, "To philosophize is to learn how to die." Not in a morbid sense, but as recognition that accepting our mortality allows us to live more fully in the present. When we stop caring so much about appearing youthful, we can appreciate the gifts that come with age, perspective, wisdom, the ability to distinguish between what matters and what doesn't. We can release the exhausting pretense that we're the same as we were at 20 and embrace who we're becoming. As Montaigne aged, he didn't lament his declining physical prowess, but celebrated his growing self-knowledge, writing, "I have never seen a greater monster or miracle in the world than myself." This self-acceptance extends to our emotions as well. We live in a culture that pathologizes normal human feelings, that treats sadness as depression, anxiety as disorder, anger as dysfunction. But Montaigne understood that emotions, even difficult ones, are not enemies to be conquered, but messengers to be heard. He wrote, "Let us give nature a chance. She knows her business better than we do." When we stop caring so much about always being happy, calm, or positive, we create space for the full range of human experience. We can feel grief without rushing to get over it. We can experience anxiety without seeing it as a character flaw. We can acknowledge anger without being controlled by it. This emotional honesty doesn't make us weak. It makes us human. And paradoxically, accepting our difficult emotions often allows them to pass more quickly than when we resist them. Perhaps most importantly, when we stop caring about always appearing strong, we open ourselves to authentic connection. Vulnerability, the willingness to be seen as we truly are, is the foundation of intimacy. As researcher Brené Brown has demonstrated, it's not our perfection that draws others to us, but our humanity. When we share our struggles, doubts, and failures, we don't repel people. We create space for them to be real with us in return. Montaigne understood this centuries before modern psychology. His essays are remarkable for their candor about his own flaws, contradictions, and uncertainties. He wrote not as an authority dispensing wisdom from on high, but as a fellow human being thinking out loud. This honesty didn't diminish his impact, it amplified it. Readers across centuries have found in his words not just ideas, but companionship, the relief of recognizing their own humanity reflected back at them. This brings us to perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of caring less. It often leads to deeper, more meaningful relationships. When we're constantly managing others' perceptions, we remain on the surface of connection. We present a curated version of ourselves rather than risking true intimacy. We agree when we want to disagree, laugh when we want to cry, say yes when we mean no, all to maintain approval. But these relationships, however numerous, leave us feeling unseen. By contrast, when we stop caring so much about being liked by everyone, we create space for being loved by a few. When we express our authentic thoughts, feelings, and boundaries, we may indeed repel some people, but those who remain are connecting with us, not with a performance. As Oscar Wilde said, "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken." This authenticity acts as a filter, drawing toward us those who appreciate our particular flavor of humanity. This doesn't mean being tactless or inconsiderate. Montaigne valued courtesy and kindness, but he distinguished between social graces and social anxiety, between considering others' feelings and being controlled by their judgments. He understood that true connection requires presence, and we cannot be fully present when we're constantly monitoring ourselves through others' eyes. The gift we can offer others is not perfection, but attention, the rare experience of being truly seen and heard. The same principle applies to our work. When we stop caring so much about how our creative efforts will be received, we free ourselves to create what wants to emerge through us. Think of any truly original artist, writer, musician, or innovator. They didn't achieve greatness by following formulas or chasing trends. They developed their unique voice by listening inward rather than outward, by being willing to make what they needed to make regardless of reception. Georgia O'Keeffe said, "I have already settled it for myself, so flattery and criticism go down the same drain, and I am quite free." This freedom is available to all of us, not just recognized geniuses. Whether you're writing a novel or an email, cooking dinner, or coding an app, presenting to executives or playing with your children. When you release the need for approval, you access a deeper well of creativity, presence, and joy in the process itself. This brings us to a crucial distinction. Caring less about external validation does not mean caring less about quality. In fact, it often means caring more deeply about the work itself rather than how it will be received. When Vincent van Gogh continued painting despite selling almost nothing during his lifetime, it wasn't because he didn't care about his art. It was because he cared about it too much to compromise his vision for market appeal. Montaigne himself was deeply committed to truth, wisdom, and self-knowledge. His essays weren't casual jottings, but careful explorations of the human condition. What he released wasn't care itself, but the anxious attachment to outcomes beyond his control. He wrote not knowing if his work would last beyond his lifetime. It has for over 4 centuries. but because the writing itself was his way of making meaning of experience. This focus on process rather than outcome is liberating in all areas of life. When we stop caring so much about whether our children achieve conventional success and focus instead on nurturing their authentic development, we become better parents. When we stop caring so much about whether a relationship leads to marriage and focus instead on whether it's healthy and fulfilling now, we make wiser romantic choices. When we stop caring so much about whether our efforts guarantee results and focus instead on giving our best to what matters to us, we live with fewer regrets. There's a Zen story about a master who, when asked about the secret to happiness, replied, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." The student, expecting something profound, protested, "That's what everyone does." The master smiled and said, "No, most people, when hungry, worry about what others think of their appetite. When tired, they push through to impress with their endurance. True freedom is found not in complexity, but in simplicity, in returning to our basic humanity." Montaigne embodied this simplicity. Despite his erudition, he valued direct experience over abstract theory. He wrote, "I speak the truth, not as much as I would, but as much as I dare, and I dare a little more as I grow older." This courage to speak truth, first to ourselves and then to others, is at the heart of caring less about approval and more about authenticity. It's a courage available to all of us, not just philosophers and artists. So how do we cultivate this courage in everyday life? How do we practice caring less about what doesn't matter so we can care more about what does? It begins with awareness. Noticing when you're making choices based on fear of judgment rather than personal values. Ask yourself, if no one would ever know about this decision, what would I choose? The gap between that answer and your actual choice is the measure of how much you're living for others' approval. Next comes acceptance, not of the status quo, but of reality as it is right now. Montaigne wrote, "Not being able to govern events, I govern myself." This isn't passive resignation, but active engagement with what is within your control, your responses, your attention, your priorities. When you accept what you cannot change, others' opinions, past mistakes, uncertain outcomes, you free up energy to focus on what you can influence. Then comes action. Small, daily choices to live more authentically. Express an unpopular opinion, respectfully. Wear what feels good rather than what's trendy. Say no to an invitation that doesn't align with your values. Create something without sharing it on social media. Let a call go to voicemail when you need solitude. Each time you choose authenticity over approval, you strengthen your not caring muscle and weaken the habit of people-pleasing. This practice extends to how you respond to criticism. Montaigne advised, "The thing in the world I am most afraid of is fear." When criticism comes, as it inevitably will if you are doing anything meaningful, resist the urge to either attack or collapse. Instead ask, "Is there something useful here I can learn from?" If yes, take the lesson and leave the rest. If no, let it pass without allowing it to define you. Remember, criticism says as much about the critic as it does about you. Similarly, practice detachment from outcomes. Do your best, then release your grip on results. As the Bhagavad Gita teaches, you have a right to perform your prescribed duties, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your actions. This doesn't mean not caring about results, but recognizing that many factors beyond your control influence outcomes. When you focus on what you can control, your effort, integrity, and presence, you suffer less when things don't go as planned. Perhaps most importantly, cultivate self-compassion. Montaigne was remarkably gentle with himself, writing, "I have never seen a greater monster or miracle in the world than myself, not as self-criticism, but as fascinated observation." When you inevitably fall back into caring too much about others' opinions, as we all do, don't add another layer of judgment. Notice, smile at the universal human tendency to seek approval, and gently redirect your attention to what truly matters to you. This journey toward caring less about external validation isn't linear. It's not something you achieve once and for all. It's a practice you return to daily, sometimes hourly. There will be moments of profound freedom and moments of falling back into old patterns. But over time, you'll notice a shift. Situations that once would have triggered anxiety now pass with minimal disturbance. Decisions that once would have required others' approval now flow from your own values. Criticisms that once would have devastated you now barely register. As you continue this practice, you may notice something surprising. Caring less about others' approval does not make you more selfish. It makes you more generous. When you're not constantly depleted by anxiety about how you're being perceived, you have more energy for genuine connection. When you're not trapped in comparison and competition, you can celebrate others' successes without threat. When you're not defending a fragile self-image, you can listen deeply to perspectives different from your own. Montaigne's essays are remarkable, not just for their self-reflection, but for their empathy. His ability to imagine himself into others' experiences, even those radically different from his own. This is the paradox. True self-acceptance leads not to self-absorption, but to greater openness to others. When you're at home in yourself, you can be genuinely curious about those who differ from you without feeling threatened by those differences. As we conclude, I invite you to imagine again that radical freedom we began with. The ability to move through the world unburdened by excessive concern for others' judgments. This freedom is your birthright. It doesn't require special talents, privileged circumstances, or years of therapy, though those might help. It requires only the willingness to question your automatic reactions, to distinguish between useful and harmful forms of caring, and to practice choosing authenticity over approval, again and again. Montaigne wrote, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself." This belonging, this coming home to who you truly are beneath the layers of social conditioning, is available to you in this moment and every moment. It begins with a simple question: what would I do, say, think, feel, or create if I cared less about being judged and more about being alive? Your answer is the first step on the path to freedom. Remember, not caring isn't about becoming cold, detached, or irresponsible. It's about becoming discerning, investing your precious energy in what truly matters while releasing what doesn't. It's about recognizing, as Montaigne did, that life is brief, uncertain, and too valuable to spend trying to meet impossible standards or please unpleasable people. It's about reclaiming your attention from external validation and redirecting it toward authentic living. The world will not make this easy. We live in a culture engineered to keep us insecure, compare, consuming, and seeking validation through likes and views. But as Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Your freedom begins not with changing circumstances, but with changing your relationship to them, with deciding what deserves your care and what doesn't. So I leave you with this invitation. Experiment with caring less. Not forever, not about everything, but just for today. About one thing that's been draining your energy without adding value to your life. Notice what happens when you release that particular form of caring. Notice the space that opens up. Notice what becomes possible in that space. And then tomorrow, try again with something else. Small acts of liberation accumulate into a transformed life. As you practice, you'll discover what Montaigne knew, that the art of not caring about the right things is actually the art of caring more deeply about what truly matters. It's the art of reclaiming your life from fear, conformity, and exhausting self-consciousness. It's the art of becoming more fully human. And in a world that profits from your insecurity, there is nothing more revolutionary than being at peace with who you are. Thank you for joining me on this exploration. I hope you'll take these ideas not as dogma, but as possibilities to test in your own experience. As Montaigne himself would insist, don't take my word for any of this. Experiment, reflect, and discover your own truth. The wisdom you need is already within you, waiting only for the courage to listen to it above the noise of others' expectations. That courage is your gateway to freedom. I'll leave you with words from Mary Oliver's poem, The Summer Day, which captures the essence of what we've been discussing. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Not what others expect you to do with it. Not what would look impressive on social media. Not what would make your parents proud or your critics silent. But what would make your brief time on this earth meaningful to you? That's the only question worth caring about.